Introduction. Town of Bedford, Massachusetts, is known for its rich industrial history and the winding rivers that run beneath its old factories. One of these factories, Bedford Manufacturing Co., stands as a slumbering giant on the edge of the underground Blackwater River. Founded in the early 20th century, this factory produced a range of products from textiles to heavy machinery. However, there was something sinister in its echoing corridors and worn brick walls, especially on the third floor, where few dared to tread. It is said that the floor is haunted by the restless spirits of two victims of a terrible crime that shook the factory decades ago. Employees avoid the floor, fearing the whispers and shadows that seem to dance to the rhythm of invisible keyboards. When John Anderson, a determined and skeptical new manager, takes over the factory, he decides to investigate the mysteries surrounding the place. What he discovers is more terrifying than he could have ever imagined. Let's go for the story. Bedford Manufacturing Co. was situated near the center of Bedford, a small and picturesque American town. With its cobblestone streets and Victorian houses, the town seemed frozen in time. The factory, however, was a somber reminder of the Industrial Revolution that once drove the local economy. Built in 1912, the imposing red brick structure had 5 floors and countless windows that, over the years, had accumulated layers of dust and grime. Hidden from curious eyes, the Blackwater River flowed beneath the factory. This underground river was a vital source of energy for the factory in its early days, powering the large water wheels that drove the machinery. Constant sound of flowing water, which some found comforting, contributed to the place's eerie atmosphere. John Anderson, a man in his 30s, had recently been hired to revitalize the factory. He was known for his efficiency and skepticism about the supernatural. When employees mentioned strange events on the 3rd floor, John dismissed them as unfounded superstition. He was determined to prove that everything had a logical explanation. On John's first day at the factory, he took a complete tour of the building. Upon reaching the 3rd floor, he noticed a noticeable change in the atmosphere. The air seemed colder, and there was an oppressive silence. The walls were covered in old graffiti, and the furniture, coated in dust, looked abandoned as if left in haste. While exploring, he heard a soft sound of keys being pressed. John followed the sound to an abandoned office at the end of the corridor. The typewriter on the desk appeared to be working on its own. Determined to uncover the truth, John unplugged the machine. However, the sound continued, now louder and more insistent. He quickly left the floor, feeling a chill down his spine for the first time. The workers shared frightening stories of visions and strange sounds. Emily, a young administrative assistant, told John about a night when she saw a dark figure moving through the corridor, followed by a high-pitched scream that seemed to come from beyond. Jack, the night guard, spoke of doors opening and closing on their own and the sound of footsteps echoing in the empty halls. Determined to learn more about the factory's past, John began to delve into old records. He discovered that in 1952, a tragic incident occurred on the 3rd floor. The night janitor, Thomas Miller, was involved with a colleague, Sarah Johnson, who also worked in cleaning. Thomas found out that Sarah was having an affair with the manager at the time, Richard Hayes. In a blind rage, Thomas killed Sarah and Richard before taking his own life. The news of the horrific crime spread quickly, and the factory was never the same. The floor where the crime occurred was closed off, and paranormal events began shortly thereafter. Reports of supernatural activities grew, and many believed that the spirits of Thomas, Sarah, and Richard were trapped there, eternally reliving their final day. Determined to put an end to the rumors and bring peace to the place, John decided to spend a night on the 3rd floor. Armed with a flashlight, a recorder, and his skepticism, he climbed the creaky stairs to the forbidden floor. The night was particularly silent, and the only sound was the constant flow of the Blackwater River below. John started his vigil in Richard Hayes' old office. At midnight, he heard indistinct whispers that seemed to come from all directions. The recorder picked up broken words and moans of agony. He saw shadows moving along the walls, and the doors began to slam violently. The air turned icy, and he felt an oppressive presence around him. In a moment of bravery, John tried to communicate with the spirits. Thomas, Sarah, Richard, "If you are here, give me a sign," he said. Response came in the form of a deafening scream that seemed to fill the corridor. John saw a nebulous figure forming in front of him, empty eyes and mouth open in a silent scream. Scared but determined, John sought the help of a paranormal expert, Father Michael Roberts, an exorcist known for his work in similar cases. Father Roberts arrived at the factory armed with holy water, crucifixes, and a rosary. Together, they climbed to the 3rd floor to perform an exorcism ritual. As Father Roberts chanted prayers and sprinkled holy water, the entities became more agitated. The walls trembled and objects flew through the corridor. Father Roberts, however, remained calm and continued the ritual. Slowly, the paranormal activities began to subside, and the spectral figures started to disappear. John and Father Roberts succeeded in freeing the tormented souls of Thomas, Sarah, and Richard. The floor fell silent, and the sense of oppression vanished. The employees noticed the change immediately, and the factory began to prosper again without the paranormal events. Months later, the factory was operating at full capacity, and the legend of the forbidden floor began to fade. John earned the respect and admiration of the employees for his courage and determination. He learned that not everything can be explained logically, and that sometimes the past must be confronted so that the present can thrive. Although the factory was finally free of its hauntings, John knew that the Blackwater River would continue to flow silently beneath the factory, guarding the dark secrets of Bedford Manufacturing Co. as life carried on above. After the liberation ritual, John and his team decided it was time to reopen the 3rd floor for use. The space was large and could be used for new offices and storage. The workers were initially reluctant, but John's insistence and the apparent calm after the exorcism convinced them to give it a chance. First step was to clean the floor. John supervised the cleanup, bringing in an outside team to help. While cleaning, they found several old objects, including a diary belonging to Sarah Johnson. The diary was dusty and worn but still legible. Curious, John began reading the entries. The pages revealed the secret love story between Sarah and Richard, detailing their hidden meetings and Thomas's growing paranoia. Sarah wrote about how Thomas had become increasingly possessive and aggressive, leading up to the fateful day when everything ended in tragedy. Reading Sarah's words brought a new layer of sadness and understanding to John. He felt a connection with these lost souls and a desire to honor their memory. Despite the initial success in reopening the floor, John began to suffer from terrible nightmare. He dreamed of the crime, reliving the night of the murders as if he were present. In the dreams, he could see Thomas chasing Sarah through the dark corridors, hearing her desperate screams and smelling the metallic scent of blood. These nightmares started to affect his mental and physical health. John became increasingly exhausted and distracted at work. He knew something was still wrong. The spirits might not be completely at peace, or there might be more to discover. Determined to resolve the mystery once and for all, John sought the help of a psychologist, Dr. James Murray, who also had an interest in paranormal phenomena. Dr. Murray believed that John's dreams were a way for the spirits to communicate, attempting to tell the whole story. John and Dr. Murray decided to conduct one last investigation on the 3rd floor. This time, they brought more sophisticated equipment: infrared cameras, motion detectors, and high-sensitivity voice recorder. The cleaning crew had already removed much of the old furniture, but the floor still retained an aura of mystery. As they explored, they began to capture strange images and sounds. One of the cameras recorded a nebulous figure moving quickly through the corridors. The recorders picked up whispers and even clear words like help and betrayal. John once again felt the oppressive presence he had experienced before. At the end of the corridor where Sarah and Richard were killed, John found a hidden door behind a bookshelf. The door was locked, but with Dr. Murray's help, they managed to break it open. Behind the door was a small room, seemingly a hideout. The room contained more diaries and letters exchanged between Sarah and Richard. Reading the diaries and letters, John and Dr. Murray uncovered a new aspect of the case. Sarah and Richard were planning to run away together, leaving Thomas in the factory behind. Richard had obtained evidence that Thomas was involved in criminal activities, using the factory as a front for money laundering. When Thomas discovered the plan, his fury culminated in the murders. This new information changed John's perspective on the events. He felt that to truly free the spirits, he needed to expose the full truth and bring justice to what happened. John gathered all the evidence and decided to call a meeting with the factory employees and the local media. John organized a press conference at the factory, where he revealed the true story behind the murders. He presented the diaries, letters, and evidence of Thomas's criminal activity. The revelation shocked the Bedford community, but also brought a sense of relief and closure to many. After the press conference, the factory gained notoriety, not just as a workplace, but as a symbol of justice and truth. The third floor was transformed into a memorial for Sarah and Richard, the small exhibit telling their stories and the events that led to their deaths. With the truth exposed and justice restored, the factory began to thrive like never before. John's nightmares ceased, and he finally found peace. The employees started to see the third floor not as a place of terror, but as a tribute to courage and love. John continued to manage the factory, now with a new understanding and respect for the past. He implemented several improvements at the factory, including employee wellness programs and historical restoration projects to preserve the place's memory. While the Blackwater River continued to flow silently beneath the factory, John knew he had done his part to bring light to the shadows of the past. The story of Bedford Manufacturing Co. was now a story of redemption and renewal, a testament to the power of truth and courage.
Introduction. In the picturesque university town of Hawthorne, nestled in the heart of New England, Hawthorne University was known for its Gothic architecture and its old, imposing buildings. Founded in the late 19th century, the university always had an aura of mystery and tradition. However, in recent years, the university dormitories had become the site of inexplicable and terrifying events. Stories of ghosts, screams in the night, and horrific apparitions had become common among students. Lucas Foster, an experienced and skeptical janitor, was hired to maintain the dormitory. Newly hired, he was about to discover that Hawthorne University harbored dark secrets that could cost him much more than his sanity. Let's go for the story. Lucas Foster, a man in his early 30s, had always been practical and skeptical about the supernatural. When he accepted the job as a janitor at Hawthorne University, he had no idea of the challenges he would face. The university was a true labyrinth of dark corridors and ancient rooms, each with its own stories. On his first day, Lucas was introduced to the dormitory. The buildings, although majestic, had a heavy and oppressive atmosphere. Students whispered about the strange events that occurred at night, doors that slammed on their own, children's laughter echoing through the corridors, and shadows moving without explanation. Lucas, however, was determined to prove that everything had a logical explanation. During his first nights in the dormitories, Lucas began to realize that there might be some truth to the students' stories. One night, while patrolling the corridors, he heard distant crying. Followed the sound to an empty room where he found an old doll sitting on the floor. The crying stopped as soon as he entered, and the doll seemed to stare at him with vacant eyes. On another occasion, while fixing a faucet in the communal bathroom, he saw a nebulous figure in the mirror. When he turned around, there was no one there. Lucas began to question his sanity, but still maintained his skepticism. Determined to understand what was happening, Lucas started to investigate the history of the university. He discovered that, in the 1920s, fire had destroyed part of the dormitories, killing several students and teachers. Among the victims was a young gay couple, William and Edward, whose secret relationship had been discovered shortly before the fire. They were the targets of bullying and violence by other students. In the 1960s, a racist couple, James and Margaret, had committed suicide in the dormitories after being accused of harassing and assaulting African American students. It was believed that the spirits of these victims still haunted the university, seeking justice and revenge. As the semester progressed, paranormal events became more intense. Students reported hearing screams of agony at night and seeing dark figures in the corridors. Some students began to abandon the dormitories, preferring to sleep in the library or even in their cars. Lucas, however, decided to confront the spirits head-on. He spent several nights patrolling the corridors, armed with a flashlight and a recorder. One night, he heard whispering voices. Following the sound, he arrived at the basement of the dormitories, where he found William and Edward, enveloped in a faint light. They begged Lucas to help them find peace, recounting the bullying and violence they had suffered. Determined to help the lost souls, Lucas sought the help of a paranormal expert, Professor Michael Hayes, former Hawthorne University student who specialized in supernatural studies. Together, they planned a liberation ritual, help the spirits find peace. The ritual was scheduled for Halloween night, when paranormal activities were at their peak. Lucas, Professor Hayes, and a few brave students gathered in the basement of the dormitories. Professor Hayes began chanting ancient hymns and sprinkling holy water around the area. As the ritual progressed, the paranormal manifestations became violent. The walls trembled and objects flew. The figures of William and Edward appeared, this time accompanied by the furious spirits of James and Margaret. A supernatural confrontation began, with the spirits fighting among themselves as the ritual participants tried to stay calm. Lucas, feeling a deep connection with the spirits of William and Edward, intervened, trying to appease their souls. He apologized on behalf of their aggressors and promised to honor their memories. Gradually, the spirits began to calm down and the violence subsided. With the ritual nearly complete, one last manifestation occurred. A dark figure, larger and more terrifying than the other spirits, emerged from the shadows. It was the spirit of the school director at the time of the fire, cruel and intolerant man who had instigated the hatred against William and Edward. Lucas and Professor Hayes, with the help of the students, confronted the malevolent entity. Reciting prayers and chants, they managed to weaken the spirit. With a final effort, Lucas threw a sacred amulet that Professor Hayes had prepared, causing the entity to dissipate. After the intense supernatural battle, silence descended over the dormitory. The spirits of William, Edward, James, and Margaret had finally found peace. The oppressive atmosphere that had haunted the corridors disappeared, placed by a sense of tranquility. The university officially recognized the tragic events of the past, creating a memorial in honor of the fire's victims and the students who had suffered discrimination. Lucas continued to work as a janitor, now with a newfound respect for the supernatural and a renewed determination to keep the university safe, everyone. With peace restored, dormitories of Hawthorne University became a place of renewal and hope. Students who had once been afraid to sleep in the buildings now felt a new positive energy. The memorial in honor of William, Edward, James, and Margaret became a point of reflection and learning for everyone. Lucas continued his maintenance routine, but now with a different approach. Always check the corridors at night, no longer looking for ghosts, but ensuring the environment remained peaceful. He also became a sort of guardian for the students, someone they could rely on in times of need. Paranormal events that haunted Hawthorne University became a legend, passed down from one generation of students to the next. Lucas, however, became a respected and beloved figure at the university. His courage and determination to confront the spirits and help the lost souls left a lasting impact. He continued to study paranormal phenomena, collaborating with Professor Hayes on various research and publications. Together, they wrote a book about the events at Hawthorne University, shedding light on the institution's dark past, offering insight into how to confront and deal with the supernatural. Over time, Hawthorne University flourished. The ghost stories became part of the institution's charm, attracting not only students but also curious visitors and paranormal enthusiasts. Guided tours of the old dormitories became popular, with Lucas often invited to share his experiences. The university also committed to creating an inclusive and safe environment for all students, learning from past mistakes. Support programs for diversity and against bullying were implemented, ensuring that all students felt welcomed and protected. Lucas often reflected on his journey at Hawthorne University. His initial skepticism had transformed into a deep understanding and respect for the supernatural. He had faced fears he never imagined and helped bring peace to tormented souls. As he walked through the now tranquil corridors of the dormitories, Lucas felt a connection with the university's past and present. He knew that despite the challenges, He had found his purpose. And so, with a sense of fulfillment, he continued to watch over the corridors, ensuring that the haunted secrets of Hawthorne University remained at peace. After the university reopened, some students began reporting new phenomena. Samantha, an art student, said she felt a presence while painting in her room. Marcos, an engineering student, woke up one night with ghostly handprints on his mirror. Lucas began to investigate these new reports. He realized that the new spirits were not from the known victims, but other tormented souls. Perhaps people who had passed through the university without leaving a trace, now seeking attention and resolution for their forgotten stories. One of the most haunted places was room 306, where several students had experienced frightening phenomena. Some reported hearing voices whispering their names, while others saw apparitions of a sad and desolate man. Lucas decided to spend a night in room 306 to better understand what was happening. He set up a camera, a recorder, and prepared for anything. At midnight, the room's temperature dropped drastically. Lucas heard heavy footsteps and a deep voice saying, "Help me." Through the camera, captured the image of a middle-aged man with eyes full of pain. The spirit revealed himself to be the ghost of a former professor, Samuel Turner, who had committed suicide after being falsely accused of harassment. His spirit was trapped, seeking redemption and justice. Determined to help Samuel's spirit, Lucas began investigating the university's old records. He discovered that Professor Turner had been the target of false accusations by students who wanted revenge for their low grades. Unfortunately, the administration at the time believed the students without properly investigating. Lucas gathered all the evidence of his innocence and presented it to the current university administration. A memorial was erected in honor of Professor Turner, and his story was finally told fairly. After the public revelation, the phenomena in room 306 ceased, and Lucas knew that Samuel's spirit had finally found peace. While researching Samuel Turner, Lucas discovered more stories of injustices buried in the university's archives. Many other spirits of students and staff were trapped in the dormitories, silenced by decades of neglect, hidden secret. He decided that the best way to resolve the problems was to bring all these stories to light. With the help of Professor Hayes and some students, Lucas started organizing weekly sessions where they told the spirits' stories, allowing the truth to be known and the souls to find rest. With so many stories revealed, Lucas and Professor Hayes decided to perform a grand purification ritual to cleanse the university of negative energies once and for all. This ritual would be the largest ever held on campus, involving students, faculty, and even members of the local community. On the day of the ritual, hundreds of people gathered on campus. Professor Hayes led the prayers while Lucas coordinated the participants. During the ritual, an intense light enveloped the university buildings, and the screams and cries of spirits were heard for the last time. After the grand ritual, the atmosphere at Hawthorne University changed drastically. The once oppressive corridors became places of joyful coexistence. Students and staff felt lighter, and reports of paranormal activities ceased. Lucas, now a local hero, was honored by the university administration for his dedication and courage. He continued his work with a new purpose, ensuring that peace and justice remained at the university. With peace restored, Hawthorne University became a symbol of inclusion and justice. Students from diverse backgrounds began enrolling, attracted by the university's story of redemption. However, old conflicts still occasionally arose, reminding everyone that Lucas's work was far from over. Lucas became a mentor to many students, helping them deal with their own stories and traumas. He started a support group on campus where students could share their experiences, find strength in the community. The story of Lucas Foster and his battle against the ghosts of Hawthorne University became a legend that inspired generations. He was remembered not just as a janitor, but as a guardian of truth and justice. The university, in turn, flourished, becoming a beacon of hope and inclusion. The lessons learned from the paranormal events shaped the campus culture, ensuring that all voices were heard and respected. Lucas Foster found his purpose at Hawthorne University, facing his own fears and helping lost souls find peace. His journey demonstrated that even in the darkest places, the light of truth and justice can shine. Hawthorne University remained a symbol of redemption and renewal, where the past was confronted and the future was built on the lessons learned. And so, with a lasting legacy, the story of the haunted secrets became an inspiration to all those who walked the corridors of the old university.